and that's to the north. It is also designated light industrial in city plan. This particular property falls within 3 development permit areas. That's 4, 5, and 8, and that's abandoned mine working hazards, wildfire hazards, and form and character, respectively. There's 2 sets of design guidelines that apply to this development. It's the general development permit area design guidelines and South End neighborhood plan. As well, a variance is proposed to increase the maximum height for the 4th building, which is at the 4-story mini storage. That's from 12 meters to 16.5 meters. Thank you very much.
Great. So who's presenting this evening from the applicants?
Hi, my name is Larry Podhora. I'm an architect, and we also have on our team Davin Reed, who's joining us from the development team and who's going to help me put up the shared files so that we can follow the drawings as we describe the project.
Right, you can go ahead and share your screen anytime.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Bear with me 1 second as I pull them up.
Okay, I'll just chat in general terms. I guess maybe thank you all for volunteering and making sure that the highest standard of development is being proposed for your community. I appreciate the work that you do.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Larry, do you want me to just start with this aerial photo just for some sighting and context? It's probably fresher in my memory than yours because I'm at 924 right now.
You sound like you're really keen to tell them just how hard a nut this is to crack. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay, well, just quickly so we all know where this project is. There's the highlighted properties, 924 Old Victoria Road. It's kind of an oddly shaped property to talk in north and west, but generally north of the site is the undeveloped 8th Street, in which this proposal proposes developing half of it and making sure that the rest of 8th Street can be developed in the future. And then off to the east is the Harbor View development, which sits on top of a forested slope and will retain that forest with the development and acts as a nice buffer. And then to the south is that existing industrial park, which is a similar layout to what we're proposing. We're proposing it's a bit of a mirror image of that industrial park. And then opposite Old Victoria Road, you see the vegetation. I think there's a strip of park in there and some residential zoned property. It's extreme topography in there that I think will ensure it's never developed. And a little bit further down Old Victoria Road is the new single-family home lots. And then to the north again, on the opposite side of 8th Street, that big vacant lot is 101 South Street, which is we intend to submit a rezoning application for that property in the coming months for a residential development. So it's a quick overview of where the project is, and I can pull up the architectural package now, Larry, if you would like to walk them through it.
Yeah, please, Davin, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great. So I think out of Davin's description, the main takeaway is that we are dealing here with some very challenging topography. There are deep hollows to be filled, and then there are rocky outcroppings on the south side, southeast side, and the accessing is relatively difficult, and we need to shield the character of Old Victoria Road. We need to make the project presentable to the context in which it finds itself, and we need to make sure that all future connections are made possible and enhanced. So that's our challenge, but significantly, it's important to note that these buildings generally find themselves at different elevations, that there are 4 of them of fairly radically different sizes and functional intents. So the building that you see on the southeast side, the rectangular box with no niches and cranks, is intended to be the self-storage project. And the thing about a self-storage on a constricted site like this is that it pretty much needs to gain in density. Otherwise, there's no commercial viability. So for that reason, we are asking for the height relaxation on that particular building. It's building 4. Then as we go north along Old Victoria Road, we are calling that building 2 for some reason that is not sequential. And that is a building that is much lower, and it straddles a difference of a full story in height between the Old Victoria Road frontage and the internal street that you see shaded in pink there. That is the access road into the site, which is gained through 8th Avenue on the northwest. So that does mitigate the impact of the massing and scale onto Old Victoria Road in that location. In fact, because of the grades, the exposed elevation is actually pretty diminutive. It's only a single story of exposed wall, and as you will see when we look at the elevation, it has been it has been treated with colors, materials, and trellises, which assist in breaking up that facade and making it even more less significant and less imposing than it would normally be. That moves us to the small building on the left side as you enter the site from 8th, which is called Building 1. And that is kind of a commercial footprint, probably going to be demised into a single, perhaps 2 occupancies. And again, it's a building that is trying to be responsive to the reduced scale of the residential development that's going to happen across 8th Avenue in the future. And also because it is glimpsed from Old Victoria Road to provide a good quality visual to that. And the last building, which is Building 3, it is intended to be something like a distribution center. So it is a little more industrial in character, with dock loading, significant turning radiuses for trucks, and not a extremely intense parking. So plus, as Davin was saying, the site that is on the north is very steeply sloping forested area, which is a major buffer, and furthermore, because of the steepness, the residential properties on top of the hill are not only visually shielded from this, but any kind of massing impact is almost negated because of the level difference. So it would never interfere with any view lines, sight lines, and so on from the top of the hill. So as I was saying, there's a lot of grading, filling, scrubbing, and grubbing to be done on the site to make it developable. And we are proposing to provide essentially a gateway to the project at the western edge of Building 2, where that little square is located. And so that will be a different kind of massing, higher quality materials to provide kind of a marker and a beacon to people who are going to be turning right onto 8th Avenue and either gaining access to the residential property to the left or to our light industrial property on the right. So that establishes a character of higher quality. And speaking of quality, the intention is to provide this kind of almost historicist, I would say, or sort of nostalgic industrial massing and character by using brick, by breaking up the facades and breaking up the window areas into smaller pieces, which are evocative of steel frame windows of days gone by. So, so using steel, using brick, using a lot of fenestration that is divided and demised in a kind of historicist sense. Davin, maybe we can skip to the next one. So these are site sections that show the relationship between massing of the various buildings. In the first section, you see the building 4, self-storage on the right-hand side, and the almost single story of building 2 on the left-hand side. You can kind of glimpse the gateway element on the extreme left. And you can see how we're trying to stratify the massing and the materials by using different colors and dado lines and glazing on all of these, even the self-storage. And I think not only does it enliven the facade, but it brings strong direct light from the south side into the 2-story commercial and light industrial units of building 2. And the section below shows the significant topographical level difference that we have to contend with on the internal street, especially on the left-hand side. You can see how steeply we're rising into the forested hillside there, and how basically the top of the hill is coincident with the parapet height of the distribution center, light industrial, if you will. Okay, next. Next. We can come back to that. Those are just some site details, but I think this is, we may be running out of time, so I just want to make sure that we hit the highlights. Darren, can you skip back to the views, the 3D views? I just want to make sure that what I was talking about a minute ago, using different materials and different colors and the fenestration to break up these light industrial boxes is pretty well evident in these views. The brickness of these buildings is going to be achieved by using, in some cases, veneer brick, in some cases, stamped concrete panels, and in some cases brick tiles, and the rest of it is going to be painted and textured concrete tilt panels with steel accents over the entrances and sidewalks and so on. Incidentally, next one, Davin, because I think we want to talk a little bit about, so these are more sections that show you the challenges of topography. In the one that's on top, you can see how, because of the granite mountain outcroppings, basically, under what's proposed to be the self-storage building, it is perched quite high up, and we have to retain it so that we can achieve the level to service the other light industrial buildings down about 4 meters. So it is a significant jump, which will be treated with texture on that retaining wall and landscaping on top that's intended to be cascading. Okay, next. I don't want to beat it to death, but these are some notions on how these units will be subdivided and how there may be stepping of the slab inside each. Next. Here's our project material board divided by buildings. And you can see that there's a lot of commonality and also difference between each building, so that there's a relationship, but also a differentiation. Okay, next. these are the plans of the buildings, allowing for the greatest flexibility of future demising as is commercially necessary. Just flip through them really quickly. Rooftops. So this is the elevation of building 1, for example. That's the small one. And we have the miscellaneous steel canopies suspended in a kind of a industrial turn of the century way on suspenders, and we have steel lintels which are built into the facade again to give it character and kind of industrial aesthetic. And we're doing this kind of aesthetic in different ways on all of the elevations as well. Next, Evan. Okay, next, I'll skip through that quickly. Yeah, some notions of the geometry of the building and how it may be demised in the future. This is a rooftop. And again, the rooftop units are very notional. Once we settle on them, then we can show them in a proper location and a proper size. Next. Next. And Davin, maybe we should return to the site plan really quickly, because I just want to mention a few items in closing here. How many minutes do we have?
That's all getting into the details there.
Yeah. So site plan. Do we still have a bit of time, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so I just wanted to touch base on the parking, which is compliant in numbers and types. There's no variance or difficulty in finding loading and parking, which is located in front of the units primarily on the internal street, which is a good thing because it is shielded from Old Victoria Road, so it doesn't appear as a parking lot on that side. We are intending to provide permanent bicycle parking in the amenity areas, and the amenity areas are essentially the plaza areas that you can see on the extreme left-hand side of building 2 and extreme left-hand side of building 1 as well. So not only do we have these special massing elements, but in front of them we have a place to sit and park your bicycle and so on. We're dealing with a shielded garbage enclosure, which is on the upper or north side of building 1, and also in the southeast corner of building 3, which is the big building. The self-storage building requires virtually no parking because it's all loading except for clients who come in to interact with office staff. So the requirement for parking in those facilities is virtually nil or extremely limited. Again, a good thing because it doesn't encumber the access egress of Old Victoria Road with a great deal of parking. And the use of those facilities is very infrequent as well, so it doesn't introduce a density of circulation and parking that is going to cause trouble along Old Victoria Road. So the pedestrian circulation. So the frontages of the light industrial buildings on the internal street are essentially all pedestrian. They are marked with islands of landscaping, and actually haven't talked about landscaping much. We are retaining some existing conifers along Old Victoria Road, but most of our vegetation is new. And I had a summary here somewhere about landscape design. So we're planting about 56 trees, and we have eight species of shrubs, so there's a great deal of variety. 2 species of ground cover. And yeah, so we're using the shrubs, ground cover, and in some cases the trees to provide accent points along the pedestrian circulation sidewalks. So the pedestrian connection to Old Victoria Road is challenging. We do have to have some exits from building 2 on that side, so there's going to be some pedestrian facility there, but that's not how those spaces and buildings are approached. So we're essentially screening them and just making them as a functional aspect, code aspect of those buildings. So the pedestrian experience is basically internal to here, but it is connected to Old Victoria Road at the amenity corner, which is on the west side, southwest side corner. Yeah, so I think that is the project in a nutshell, and I suppose we can field questions if you have any. Gavin, do you have any? Davin, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think that was a good overview. Unless you guys, is there any other details about it you'd like to discuss?
If you guys are done your formal presentation here, then we move over and we do a little round table with the committee members. So if you're ready for that, we'll do that then.
Sounds good.
Well, let's do that. I think we're very close to 15 minutes anyway, right?
Yeah.
Maybe past. Yeah. Okay.
So, and if you could just take your screen sharing down, and then I can see everybody. So that'd be great. Thanks. Okay. From the panel members, do any of you have some questions of staff before we get going? Okay. Angela? Yeah.
Just before the meeting, I was just curious about the variance. I see that in the zoning industrial 2 zone permits 40% lot coverage and an additional 15% lot coverage at a maximum height of 12 meters. So with the variance, there'd be additional floor area. So I'm curious to know if that would trigger the requirement for additional amenity discussions and the point system that's identified with categories of Schedule D.
So you'd be referencing lot coverage, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
section
So just
13.6.1.
Great. Yes. So the additional, the Schedule D is for lot coverage and isn't specific to height. So the height's sort of separate. And so in accordance with the land use designation for this property, it does, support taller building forms, especially on these industrial lands as well. So there is some supportive policy.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dean. Christine? Okay, well, we'll get started. Kevin, would you like to give her a go?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Davin and Larry, for your presentation. Very nice presentation. Obviously, light industrial is something that is almost overlooked really in our city. We obviously have concerns and problems finding enough residential, but light industrial is something the Boxwood developments, for example, have filled up very quickly, and the need for light industrial is definitely there. So I applaud you on this project because you're kind of meeting a lot of needs, including the mini storage, which is very much in demand too. It seems we can't make these fast enough. So thanks for your presentation. Right off the bat, I support your variance for height. It is quite substantial what you're asking for height. Over 13, 14 feet. But if it's something that can work to create more density for this project, I'm definitely in favor of that. I think you did a very good job citing the project. I like how you're coming in off of 8th Street and coming in through the site, and how you've kept the building 3, which is probably going to be the least desirable building due to the loading, kept that tucked away. And with building 4 being the building we're asking for the height variance for, I think that will help to hide that building from the street as well. I agree with staff comments that looking at ways to improve pedestrian circulation is something you might want to take a look at, Larry, and see if there's ways. One that kind of concerns me a bit is the building 4 is kind of built up on its own pedestal platform, which is only accessed off of Old Victoria Road. And the way I view the drawings, there's no way whatsoever to get down to the lower level. There's no stair. Is that correct, Larry?
That's correct. The business of operating the self-storage facility is very different and completely separate to everything else. And it just so happens that it's under that building that we're finding that huge rocky outcropping. We're not even absolutely sure whether we can use the full extent of the lowest floor. We may have to step around that rock. So that's going to be a geotechnical and design challenge going forward, but we think we might be able to achieve that. And because it's the highest point of the land, and because the site slopes so drastically to the north, it just kind of dictates what you can do with the form.
Is building 4 going to be fenced off for security?
Yes.
Around all 4 sides?
The
And the
side,
front?
yeah, the side on the north, which is the retaining wall, we can potentially not have that there because it's not scalable. But the rest of it has to be secured because when you're a client, you do want that security in place. So
Right.
It'll be gated.
And that means you will have a gate out front, a secure gate, to access it off of Old Victoria.
That is a very good point, Kevin. I appreciate you making that. The security can be achieved either with a gate and fencing around the parking lot, or we can secure the perimeter of the building itself, which is also it also gives you security, but it allows the use of the parking lot, which we actually want to discourage in off hours and so on. So
Right.
I think, yes, we would probably be looking at a gate, which is not shown right now. So that is a good point.
Yeah, and so those 2 sidewalks coming off of building 4 to Old Victoria Road are fire egress only. They wouldn't be keyed entries. Looks like there's two little walkways that might go to doors.
Oh yeah, that's right. Those would be exits.
The exit only, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So you don't need a fence, a secure fence along Old Victoria.
No.
Okay, thanks. So that's it really for the siting. Forming character of the building design, I think you've done a real nice job with materials. Obviously, the buildings are fairly, well, the exception of building 1 and building 2, have a lot of straight linear lines that might, at least along Old Victoria Road, you might want to look at enhancing a bit. Building 4, I noticed you didn't add any windows on the top floor facing Old Victoria Road. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, again, a good point, Kevin. Basically, what is the typical design response for self-storage is that the operators want people to look and understand what's going on inside the building. So the glazing is there to kind of promote the business, to show what it's used for. And so windows are desirable for that, but they're not functionally necessary, and they are they're an item that I guess needs to be managed for cost and bringing in direct sunlight, which could be disruptive. So it's a balancing act. I think as you see on the south side, we have the 3 bays that are kind of blocked in. Now, one can argue that those should be fenestration, and you wouldn't be wrong in that, but it is unnecessary to do that for business reasons, right?
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate that, Larry. It's really a matter whether or not that or something else could be done. Building 2, I really don't have as much concern about how it addresses the street, but I think building 4, because of its massing, and if you are going to be asking for a substantial height variance, that you might want to look at ways to maybe enhance the elevation along Old Victoria Road. It could be done possibly with furring out of materials to create shadow lines. I'm not going to give you ideas, but windows is one of the easy ways, but look at ways to possibly do that. In staff comments also, they had a question regarding the guidelines regarding the use of natural materials like wood. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes. We had to kind of scratch our head over that one. It's kind of flying in the face of the desire to make it look like historicist interpretation of sort of picturesque turn of the century industrial development, which relied heavily on steel, glazing, brick, that kind of thing. It's called, we're calling this brickyard for now. And so that was the idea, right? So introducing wood into that is not a simple or an easy thing, but we could certainly look at some elements of it and bring it in. We did, kind of scratch our head and found it in the end to be kind of gratuitous, like bringing something in that's rather foreign, but it's for the purpose of being compliant.
Maybe there's a way to incorporate it into your landscape concept. It might not take much, but I noticed one thing with the form and character and siting. At the beginning of your introduction, you had a 3D rendering that showed the entrance off of 8th Street, and you showed what appeared to be a custom pylon sign. Is that something you're committing to?
We're not committing necessarily to that design. It is kind of modern and in a way out of keeping with the rest of the buildings. So we're not, I'm going to say we're not committing to that. I think it's a placeholder for a corporate signage in that location somewhere that's going to say, okay, these are the tenants, this is the development, right? But not necessarily that design.
Other things the only thing I would recommend also is obviously the screening of rooftop equipment, which is something that was also in staff comments. And I think their recommendation, if you can look into it, if there's a way you can locate a shower change room for people that could be biking to work, could also be something to consider. So that's it for form and character. Landscape concept, I think what you've done with retaining as many trees as you can, and the palette that you have for the landscape concept is good. What is the project that you're planning for the site lighting, especially within the site?
So the site lighting is going to be fairly muted and architectural in nature along building 2 facing Old Victoria Road. Similarly, the self-storage, we're not going to have any lighting above level 2, so that in the evening you don't sense the extra height. You only see the bottom 2 levels. But no searchlights, no high intensity lighting anywhere except when you get to building 3. And there we will need to have some additional lighting for the marshalling yard and the loading area. And there will not be any poles. It will be building mounted lighting that is directed internally to the loading areas specifically. And the rest of it will be architectural lighting as well.
Yeah, obviously that's that whole between building 3 and building 4 from a security standpoint. Obviously, you're going to have to be careful there, and wall packs probably wouldn't be able to flood the area sufficiently to meet security levels. And there's no real location to put light poles in there. So it's something you probably have to just look at the SEPTED issues for that. It's not a recommendation, but just curious if you had anything planned for that. In the parking areas, I think it would be wise to include some electric car charging stalls and also a location for electric bike stalls, hopefully fairly centrally located. So people from any of the building 1, 2, and 3 can get to them. The garbage locations, there's only 2 of them, but for building 4, they'd have to walk with their garbage all the way around to 8th Avenue and come back in to get to the garbage. Is that correct?
So Kevin, here's a little known fact about self-storage facilities.
Yeah.
They prohibit garbage, basically, right? They don't want people to be taking out their old stuff and dumping them on site. So everybody who has belongings in a self-storage facility has to take them off site. So what we're talking about is a tiny little management office with some paper waste and that does not require a bin of any size. They're actively trying to discourage people from garbage on site. So that's so this is kind of driven by the actual requirements of the business rather than multi-use conversion in the future or something like that.
You do have room in that parking area beside building 4 to put in some small garbage locations there, because there is the office and people do come in there and they will put stuff in storage. They might unpack them. Yeah. And where it's going to go. It's going to be thrown somewhere. So I think you do have the opportunity to locate the garbage, even a small little recycle, almost like a residential style recycling garbage. And
that's not a problem. Yeah, absolutely.
The only retaining walls are really right at building 4. Is that correct? That you're showing?
Yeah, the north side of building 4, and it also there's a step down on the west side of the parking lot of building 4, and then the entire building 2, the south wall, kind of acts as a retaining wall in subgrade. Between building 2 and building 4, there's a walkway that goes around towards the front that's separated by a fairly tall retaining wall for the parking area of building 4. Is that right? It's like a little bit of a well there, that there'll be a walkway that goes towards Old Victoria Road that's going to be pretty much sunken right down, right? Except that it is not really a pedestrian circulation walkway. It would be a fairly unpleasant place to walk. So we're not encouraging that, or we're not designing it to be a circulation. We're just going to leave it as a gap to be planted with something that doesn't need a lot of light.
Yeah. So right on the southeast corner of building 2, where that walkway comes and then runs in front of building 2, you're not planning to connect like it looks like on the landscape concept that sidewalk connects to Old Victoria Road. So it's
Yeah,
not
so-
going to connect. It
So,
can't connect.
that collects that little stairwell and facility connects the back sidewalk of building 2, which collects all of the exits from building 2, right? So it is not, as I was saying earlier, a way of accessing that building or any of the units in it. It is a very utilitarian facility to evacuate people from the backside as required by code. So it,
Okay.
you know, it's not to be enhanced or drawn attention to too much, but it's necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So my last comment was really because you mentioned that you might not be committing to a really nice custom pylon sign on the corner of Old Victoria and 8th. That if you don't do that and you're just considering maybe a standard pylon sign, then maybe you will do what staff comment recommended, which is to add sort of a gateway, a little bit nicer landscape concept gateway to that corner to draw people into 8th Avenue.
Just
So
a little
that-
clarification there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we're committing to having a pylon sign there, and it's going to be lovely. It might be more in keeping with the rest of the buildings. We're
Yeah.
just, we're just not committing to that specific design. That's all. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because if it's going to be the typical steel one that has the backlit signage that we see typically on a lot of our streets, if it's going to be something like that, it would obviously be in need of some sort of highlighting there. But if you are going to commit to a nice custom sign there, I don't think it would be necessary. But I just want to put it in there just in case something gets done that it doesn't end up being because that prow on the corner, you have a great opportunity to do something special to draw people in down 8th Avenue. So, but aside from those things, sorry for rambling, but I think this is a very good project, and I look forward to seeing it built. So thanks, Larry, and thanks, Davin.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Angela, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Very attractive industrial buildings that, as Kevin said, definitely a need for industrial floor area in the city. I'll just start with supporting staff comments. There was quite a few things in there I thought were quite good, including the showers and the landscape screening on the walls, and trying to enhance the pedestrian connections where possible within the site. Of course, car charging stations are always good, and additional bike stalls are always welcome for those commuting, as well as the lighting plan. And I don't know if it was part of the comments, but I feel that it would be beneficial if there was some sort of subtle lighting included along Old Victoria and even along 8th Ave for all the residential people that will be frequenting these streets in the near future. And yeah, supportive of the subtle signage that works well, just keeping in mind of the fact that the industrial developments living with this residential future development across the street, and then also across 8th Ave. I didn't see that there was any sort of detailed plans with the amenity spaces, but I'd just like to note that I'd be supportive of appropriate seating for employees, and also some weather protection if that hasn't been part of the proposal for the amenity spaces for the employees. For the site design, the design guidelines does talk about having a substantial buffer, either natural man-made for the residential when it's adjacent to residential neighborhoods to the north, definitely has a substantial natural buffer. I think it doesn't say the distance on this landscaping plan, but I'm suspecting it's meeting the minimum requirements of 1 meter. Can't really tell how that's going to build out, but if there's any possibility to sort of enhance the landscaping along 8th Ave, that would be, I think, something to consider. And then thinking about harmonizing the industrial development with the residential. So just the landscaping would be something to think about for that reason. And then the signage as well, not to be too invasive, industrial looking. So that I'd support those comments that staff made and Kevin made. And just due to the nature of the low maintenance of these buildings, I feel like the buildings would lend themselves well to green roof technologies or solar capture if possible. I think it would be important to try and incorporate those types of technologies if they can, and potentially even capture some of that solar for the buildings themselves to offset some of the energy costs. So that's just the green building comments. And I think that was my 2 last comments. So thank you very much again for your, the variance. So understand that based on the topography, the residential to the north and the future residential on 8th Ave won't necessarily be affected by the variance that is 14 or so feet. But without seeing any sort of profile or cross-section that is related to the residential, I can't really tell how it may or may not affect view corridors or the shadow effect potentially on some of these, especially the residential to the north. But if in fact there is no impacts, then I would be supportive. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Angela. Ken, would you like to go ahead? Unmute your mic, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I don't have too many comments. I think a lot of the questions I had was clarified by Kevin and the discussion you had with him. I really like the elevations and the treatment of the different buildings that you made, and I support the variance for the height variance. It certainly, I don't think it, unfortunately, although it's the highest point of the site and it's the highest building, but I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact on the surrounding residential area. I think that, and I support it because even though it may add to your making it more viable project, I think it's worth it to go with that variance. And I certainly, most of the staff comments I agree with. And so I think it's a good project. And like Kevin says, I think be looking forward to seeing such a project go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Ken. Hillary?
Thank you. Yeah, just really appreciate the presentation and really am listening with great interest to the comments from the other panel members. So thank you so much, Kevin and Angela and Ken, for your detailed comments. I think you covered a lot of really important things. So honestly, I don't have much of substance to add here, but I like the look of it and recognize the need for more of this sort of light industrial in Nanaimo. So yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. And I'm really interested to see what the adjacent residential development could look like. And I think that the look of this, yeah, I like the look and hope that it will fit in well with that. And yeah, it's quite a big variance, but if in fact it's not really impacting the neighbors, then I don't see why that couldn't be a thing. So yeah, appreciate the comments from everyone. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Hillary. Jonathan.
Thank you. Yeah, so for the site design, I agree with the staff comments. And thanks, Larry, for clarifying where the employee amenity space is. There isn't any detail about the site furnishings. But yeah, my recommendation would be tables and seating, because for workers in an industrial area, there's really nowhere to go to eat lunch outside or anything like that, or for breaks. So it would be good to have tables and seating. Potentially look at covered, something like for shade or rain cover for the winter months, so people can use the outdoor space in all types of weather conditions. And then yeah, bike parking. You mentioned some bike parking in that amenity area, but for workers, it would be good to have secure bike parking. Most workers don't want to leave their bikes outside during the day. So yeah, that's my comments on the amenity area. There's a staff comment about incorporating a gateway element at the corner of Old Victoria and 8th Street. Yeah, I think some sort of landscape feature there would be nice. So maybe something involving like a boulder or rock feature, since it's a rocky site, sort of giving a nod to that. So yeah, incorporating boulders into the landscape is something I would recommend, and maybe having a feature at the corner there. And maybe that landscape entry feature could be an opportunity for incorporating some wood if you want to proceed with incorporating wood material into the site, to meet that staff comment or that part of the South End neighborhood plan. And yeah, for landscape design, yeah, I see a few native species in the plant palette there, and some ornamental species. For the native species, I see there's a few arbutus trees kind of in the parking lot coming off of 8th Street, and those are they are really attractive trees, but they are that's a very difficult species to establish, especially on a disturbed site. So I'm not sure those would be successful in this location. So I would consider the arbutus trees require very specific soil conditions and stuff for establishment, and usually they have to be planted at a really small size so they can adapt as they grow. So the 6 centimeter caliper might not even be commercially available for that species. But yeah, I would say if you want like a tree that has an interesting branching pattern, maybe consider a different species in that area that would have a greater chance of survival in a parking lot context. Some of the other ornamental species in the plant palette, I couldn't really tell where the different shrub species are located. The symbols were a bit low resolution and blurry. So, but just looking at the plant lists, yeah, a lot of the ornamental species, some of them are ones I'm not familiar with in this region, so which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be good to try new ideas, but maybe I noticed quite a few of the species prefer moister, wetter soil conditions, so maybe I would recommend just checking the shrub species ground covers just to make sure that they'll be well suited for drier, potentially more drought conditions that you might encounter at this location. Yeah, I'm wondering if you could clarify if you have any more information about what the stormwater management strategy is, if the landscape is a part of that in this design.
I can talk to that. I don't think the stormwater management plan has been incorporated into the design, into the landscape design. Very much, it's right now the stormwater. It all kind of follows at a natural slope of the land, which would be to the sort of the northeast, where we'll go underneath or cut through 8th Street, and there's we're working on it right now because it's basically a joint stormwater management plan with the residential development at 101 South Street. So ultimately, all that stormwater from the 924 Old Victoria Road and 101 South Street will be collected and sent towards the wetland that is on 101 South Street. And we're working on a wetland enhancement plan there that incorporates that. So, and that's a draft plan that should be prepared shortly. And we were going to send a copy of it to Kevin Bridges. He's been kind of we've had some preliminary discussions with him, and he's interested in providing some input on what that wetland enhancement would look like. So. Yeah, it's related to the stormwater management plan for 924 Old Victoria Road as well.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I just wanted to note that like the South End neighborhood plan does mention a few times about stormwater management in the landscape, so something to consider how the landscape areas could contribute to infiltrating water on site if your geotechnical situation allows for that. For the retaining walls, Larry mentioned that they'll be textured. Do you have any more detail on what that would look like? Is it a concrete wall with a pattern or like a stacked block or what?
Yeah, we were considering using a form liner, probably either some sort of a texture that is abstract or going with vertical fluting. Something like that, but we don't have it sorted out yet. We just know that that's a surface that is highly visible and very tall. So we're going to spend some effort in treating it.
Okay, and you mentioned that there would be cascading plants over the retaining wall. It looks like in the planting plan it's just shown as sod at the top of the wall. Is that?
Yeah, something, you're right. This is something that I've discussed with Jessica, who's the landscape architect, and in my mind, it was done, and then I see that it hasn't been done. But there's certainly an opportunity to have that. I think that would help us dress up the north wall of that retaining side. Not that it's very visible to anybody except Building 3 users, but still it is a significant element. And if rather than having some upright plants, I don't know if you agree with me, but to have something that does cascade down might be useful. That was my idea, and I guess maybe Jessica didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, so I support the idea of the cascading plants.
Okay.
And the textured wall.
Okay.
Is there a guardrail or anything on top of the wall?
There would have to be a guardrail, because unless we completely separate it with fencing, on that's inboard and from the building, and make that area inaccessible. But it would have to be accessible to people who are doing maintenance on the planting. So yeah, we will have to have a steel rail at 4 feet to protect people from falling over.
Okay, and so I guess you don't know what the appearance of that would be at this stage.
Well, we don't want to draw too much attention to it or provide too much detail, so I think the simpler the better. I think we're just looking at steel piping, probably at a 1.5 feet on center, that goes up to 4 feet. So we would have 2 intermediate horizontal rails on uprights every 8 feet or so, standard stuff.
Okay. I'm just a bit unclear. Are you proposing any fencing on the site at this stage? I think you're muted.
On the south side of building 2, on the landscape plan, where we're retaining the existing trees, there is a protection fence proposed for that. That would be a place maybe where we can introduce some good wood detailing. And then we talked a little bit about the security fencing for the self-storage building. Part of that is the guard over top of the retaining wall, but most of it will be fencing. And as far as the gate to Old Victoria Road, we certainly intend to make that gate and the fence on either side the architectural variety of black painted pickets rather than any kind of chain link. But the west side of it, I'm not really sure how that's going to be approached. We may continue that fence along, or we may go to something else. I don't know. But certainly the frontage on Old Victoria Road should be something other than utility fencing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And my last comment, so there's a detail for our gravel river rock, and it looks like it's on the east edge of the site, as well as between, I guess, the retaining wall and the self-storage building. There's a river rock strip. So yeah, was that proposed there just due to the I guess what's the rationale for the river rock in those locations as opposed to
yeah, Jonathan, I think the purpose of it is simply to not making a walking surface, and to prohibit people squeezing between the retaining wall and the east wall of building 2. So that's the purpose of it. If we can plant it and something's going to survive there in that dark pocket, then that would also be an option. But I think that was the intention, is just to not make it any kind of space that people want to walk on.
Okay. Yeah. So I would just say consider a shade tolerant plant if possible, but river rock's okay too, between the retaining wall and the proposed self-storage building. The gravel strip on the east edge of the site, though, part of it's next to the parking lot, and so that's not quite as shady. Maybe that there could be planting there if you can find a suitable species.
Okay.
And that's all my comments. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Well, I don't really have anything to add. That's been so thorough. Really appreciate everybody's contribution to this discussion. So just like to say to the applicants that it's a great looking project. I think it's cited really well, and I really appreciate the sensitivity that you've applied to considering all the different elements, it's a very strange property in a very weird neighborhood. You've got residential, you've got industrial, you've got in between the highways kind of thing. So I think it's a challenge on how you put all those elements together, and I think you put a lot of thought into that and really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing that continued. And I think the panel's given you some good ideas to just even enhance that even further, and I would support all of those, including the variants. So I'm not hearing any sort of anybody against the variants. So I think that that's not going to be a problem for us at all. So that's good. So what we need to do now is just sort of round up. Kevin, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, to Christine and Lania, if she's there. I think it was brought up by one of the panel members about staff comments and things that were brought up in staff comments. And I think it's probably important, I think, for staff to clarify, because even though the staff creates comments in the staff report, that doesn't make them recommendations. It only becomes recommendations if we include them and reiterate on their comments, and ones that we don't comment on don't become recommendations, and staff can decide whether or not they want to do them. So maybe Christine and Lania, if they're there, can just clarify that, so that we know that there might be certain ones of the staff comments that were written down that we might not have included, and they won't be included as recommendations.
Sorry, Kevin, if you could just clarify. So you're asking if some of the comments,
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because sometimes people, panel members in the past will say, well, I support the staff comments regarding this project, thinking that they're going to be included as recommendations, which they're not. And I just want to make sure staff agrees with that, because it was brought up in the past a few years ago that unless we, I think somebody in the past might have mentioned that I agree with all staff comments, and we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to make recommendations verbally, and just to make sure that panel members understand that like staff comments are comments, not recommendations.
I see Ling has popped up on the screen down below, so I'll let her respond.
Hi everyone, sorry I'm a little further away from the screen there, but certainly the comments that are put forward as recommendations by the panel are highlighted to the applicant after this meeting. And then following that, once we receive all the responses through our referral process on an application, we provide a comprehensive letter with all of the comments from other staff departments, as well as our own section. And in there, we can reiterate any design guidelines, issues or comments that have not been adequately addressed or maybe require a bit of a conversation. So not to worry if there's items that staff have identified in our comments to you that you haven't translated into a recommendation formally. If we feel that it's worth further conversation with the applicant, we will highlight that in the comprehensive letter. It just won't be noted that it was a recommendation by the panel. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, maybe as a panel, we need to just take that. If you feel strongly about one of the staff recommendations, then bring it forward, and we'll put it down as a recommendation from our panel as well. So there's kind of a double hit there.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to convey, was that if you do feel strongly about a staff comment, bring it up as a recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Now I've got quite a list here, so I'm going to need your help to. I'm going to go over them here. Kevin, quite a few of them came from you, so I'm going to start at the top of my list. I have something about the pedestrian access. Did you want to make a recommendation in that regard or not? I wasn't quite clear at the end of your comments.
Yeah, I think if there's a way that they can just look at it, look at ways to improve the pedestrian circulation throughout the site. Most of these buildings really aren't related in business necessarily, but if there are ways to improve the pedestrian circulation, I think that's something that they can look at as a recommendation.
Okay, so consider ways to improve pedestrian circulation throughout the site.
Mhm.
Second one, consider a gate into the access off Victoria Road to Building 4. Do you know? Okay.
No, don't need that. That's a matter of their use.
Okay. Consider ways of varying the visual effect of the windowless fourth floor on Building 4.
Yes, that faces Old Victoria Road.
Okay.
Right.
If you have a better way to phrase that, let me know.
Yeah, even just as simple as looking at ways at enhancing the facade of Building 4 along Old Victoria Road.
I actually had a question about that. Please excuse me for jumping in, Kevin, but just to that point, is art a way of doing that? Is that one of the ways that would address that?
We have who's speaking? We need that for the minutes. Is this Guy Bouchard speaking?
I'm sorry. Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, that's going to be, we can't tell you what to do with it. We just look at it being a form and character, ways to look at ways to enhance it, and you'll deal with that through staff. Staff understands what our concerns are, that there's a lot of plain mass, in my opinion, there's a lot of plain mass along that top floor, and look at ways to enhance that elevation. And if it's artwork, I guess you have to make sure that it's not necessarily artwork related to signage, but you can do a lot of things with it, including artwork. I just don't want to recommend that.
Fair enough. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted clarification. It was one of my notes.
Okay. So consider ways of enhancing the facade of Building 4 based on the facade facing Old Victoria Building 4.
Yeah.
Provide appropriate screening for rooftop equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Consider adding secure bike parking and a change room with showers for cyclists. I think I heard that from a few people, so I've kind of combined those two. Consider adding electric charging, places for cars and electric bikes in the parking area.
Yep.
Consider adding a garbage container near the entrance of Building 4.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, I rent a storage unit, and I think if you provide a garbage bin, the chances are that people begin to use it. And I think I agree with Larry that you shouldn't encourage people to they should be encouraged to take away their own garbage, because that just encourages people to dump garbage from their storage units. And
that's what I'm worried about, is they're going to dump the garbage in the hallways, leave it in the hallways, or dump
that's up to people to clean up. I mean, that's policing of your storage unit. But I'm sure that people can be notified if they do leave their garbage. It's not that there's that many people coming in that the managers would know who's there, and certainly have video surveillance so that people could be notified if they dump garbage. But I think people should not be encouraged to take garbage to a storage unit.
Yeah, and keep in mind that there is the office there too. So they will have recycling paper.
Larry says it's just a little garbage bin for stationery. You're not storing packages away.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if everybody is in agreement that they don't need it, I would gladly remove that. So
I think it's sort of up to them, related to their work.
Okay. So I will leave that one out.
Okay. Now, I've had a couple different comments on the landscaping feature on a corner of 8th and Old Victoria Road. Kevin, you said if a pylon sign is not being used, consider landscape features to create a gateway design to enhance the corner of 8th and Old Victoria Road. If we take the pylon sign out there and just say consider some landscaping features to create.
Yeah, or like how staff comment recommended, provide a gateway element to the corner of 8th Avenue and Old Victoria Road. And if the pylon becomes part of that gateway, then it becomes part of the gateway.
Yeah, so we don't really need to meet. mention the
Yeah.
bylaw one way or the other. So consider
That's right.
landscaping feature to create a gateway design to enhance the corner of 8th and Old Victoria Road.
That's right.
Consider adding lighting along Old Victoria Road and 8th. I think that was one of Angela's. Did you want that as a recommendation, Angela?
Sure, consideration, yeah.
Okay. Consider adding an amenity space. Okay, I think I've got this in the amenity space. I'm going to consider ways to harmonize the industrial and the residential. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's one or not. I think I'm not sure who added that.
I think I had mentioned that, and it was just related to the landscaping. I couldn't quite tell if it was beyond the 1 meter requirement. It just, in the design guidelines, it does talk about substantial buffer between the residential areas and when there's incompatible land uses. So if there's opportunity to enhance that buffer along 8th Avenue, I think it would be in keeping with the guidelines and being better neighbor, helping that enhance incompatible uses.
Right. Okay. So consider ways to use the landscape to harmonize the transition between the residential and industrial areas. How does that sound?
Yeah. And also tying that concept into the signage as well, rather than typical industrial sign, keeping residential elements in mind with that.
The sign design that will harmonize with the residential and industrial. Okay. I'll count these after we get done. Consider green options such as a green roof and solar power. Add some tables and seating in a covered area to the outdoor amenity space. So again, I had a couple of people mention that one, so I've just combined it. I think I've already got the secure bike parking. Consider a different species of trees other than arbutus and ensure plant species used can thrive in the weather conditions in the area. How does that sound, Jonathan?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Consider a different species of tree other than arbutus and check that plant species used can thrive in the weather conditions of the area.
Yeah, I would say consider I guess what's a good way to say that? Yeah, so for the arbutus tree, consider an alternate species. I guess better suited for the industrial context. Or if they could do the arbutus, they would just need more of a custom soil spec, custom planting spec. The typical spec wouldn't work very well for that tree. But it's possible. It's just very difficult. But yeah, I would say consider an alternate species alternate to the arbutus that's better suited for an industrial context, and then more general plant species like the shrubs. I would say, review the shrub species and to ensure that they're suitable for the moisture conditions on site, soil moisture conditions on site.
Okay, and consider adding some texturing and or trailing plants to the retaining wall. Consider replacing the gravel strip by the parking lot with a planting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings up to 14 recommendations. Do you want me to go through them again, everybody, or are you okay with them? Yes, okay. All right, and I don't see any objection to the variance. So can I have a motion to accept this proposal as presented with approval of the variance and with the addition of the 14 recommendations. So somebody, Ken, do you want to move? And Angela was second. All in favor? Okay, all in favor, and that's it. So